Hello and welcome back to the Not Your Neurotypical Fitness podcast. And I've got another amazing, amazing guest who I'm so excited to chat to today and hear all her expertise and words of wisdom. I've got the wonderful Becky on, and we had to reschedule this because Becky got hit with the cold flu thing that seems to be just destroying everyone at the moment. But I'm so glad we managed to rearrange, and I'm really, really excited for this conversation. So I'm not going to undermine what you do, Becky. You're right to give us a quick introduction as to who you are and what you do, because I know what it is and it's amazing, but I don't want to disservice it in just saying, oh, you're just a coach or whatever.
Um, but yeah, so yes, I'm Becky. I'm a BABCB accredited CBT and EMDR therapist, which is a lot of jargon for saying that I'm a psychotherapist essentially. Also a mental health nurse, but also background as a fitness trainer for many years as well. And yes, but I primarily specialize in supporting people with eating disorders and neurodiversity, the combo, the intersection between them. So usually ADHD, so usually clients with ADHD and autism, but there's OCD as well, and any kinds of neurodivergence essentially, because there's a link between the two, as we'll yeah probably get onto in a little bit.
Amazing, amazing. And that's really interesting. I actually didn't know that you did like sort of fitness before. So just out of
Yeah.
curiosity, what was like the transition from being in the fitness space to doing what you do now? Because obviously there is links and stuff, but
Mm.
obviously they are still very, very different for
Yeah.
sure.
I started working in the fitness industry when I was 17.
Right.
Um, so yeah, I'll keep this part of the story short but relevant. But yeah, I just worked in leisure centres for ages. I was always in kind of indoctrinated into the fitness world from quite a young age. Seeing my mum doing fitness and stuff, and yeah, so then I trained as a PT and a group fitness instructor. Gosh. 15 years, 17 years ago now. Anyway, too many years ago. And I primarily I did group fitness for 10 years. All Les Mills, a lot
Yeah.
of it. All the following the what I call the boom bust cycle of fitness of working in the fitness world. So there's a lot of overlap in terms of I ended up at one point I was working full time as a mental health nurse and I was teaching classes in the evening. And I don't even know how I did that now. I genuinely don't know.
Yeah.
Um, Through lots of burnout cycles, and here we are.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's the overlap between the ADHD, the autism, my own lived experience of eating disorder, and using exercise as a coping strategy as well. And also, I was getting paid for it.
Yeah.
Like yeah, and you have to rock up for people when you're teaching classes, and yeah, give your very best. So yeah, so I am well versed in in terms of like yeah, burnout cycles, perfectionism, all these things that come in with being in the fitness world.
For sure. And
Um,
it's
yeah,
really interesting you say that because obviously I'm very, very in the fitness space and
yeah,
I do see it a lot with a lot of coaches and personal trainers. Obviously, there is a lot of people who do put their hand up and say, I've got ADHD and I've got this. But what's been really interesting is so many people, since I've been a bit more vocal about myself and my journey, so many of my colleagues have come forward and said, I resonate. And I think there is probably a same way that there's a high percentage of entrepreneurship in ADHD.
yeah.
I do think in the fitness space as well. But again, that we could go off on a tangent on that. So where I want to start is your journey with your sort of interest in ADHD, because usually it comes from personal lived experience and something that we're passionate about, and we all have our own unique journeys. So where did that start for you? Has it been something that's been of a part of your life since childhood, or is it something more recent?
It's definitely something about always being the quiet child and or kind of this very much feeling like I'm quite sensitive
Mm,
and quite different from other people and I absorb a lot and hold a lot of that in and I just always thought there's something different, but we didn't really have the language for it back in the old 90s and 2000s and the neurodiversity movement over the last well I've seen over the last 5 6 years in particular since COVID. We have a whole language now around neurodiversity that we didn't have before. It was there, but how it was understood, wasn't there. How I then came to it in terms of, so I was a mental health nurse like across all, different areas, and then the best area I love working in was university wellbeing, and I was a mental health and disability advisor. So I just ended up with all the students who happened to have ADHD and or autism diagnosed or not diagnosed. Ended up being like just being the go-to person for these students and the difficulties that they're facing on their course. And I was like, hang on a minute, why am I why am I resonating with these students so much? And then I got an ADHD diagnosis about, was it 2 weeks before COVID lockdown hit, I think.
Yeah.
And then yeah, so I've worked with, students across the lifespan since 2017 with, neurodivergent presentations, but the language wasn't there, the presentation, the knowledge and awareness that we have now wasn't there. And I have a bit of a sense when something's coming and when something's gonna change, or I'm like, this is gonna change and this is gonna explode. So I better get my diagnosis. I got my diagnosis because I think I'm not gonna be able to get in soon because yeah, and then obviously it snowballed from there. And then the autism side of things, of actually knowing that a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, the combination of the two is there and really should be like assessed for at the same time. We've got two very separate services, and neither do the two shall meet. But if yeah, there's the commonality between the two is just there, and then yeah, for me, autism diagnosis came later in the picture. But yeah,
Amazing.
that's a short version.
And it's really valuable what you said there about that whole, there should be a way that we can do it together, because I wasn't aware of, I'd heard the term ADHD and stuff, but in my head, when I first got my ADHD diagnosis, was very much in the belief that there's ADHD and there's autism, and you are one,
Mm,
because you're on this spectrum, you can't be at both ends of the spectrum, sort of thing. And that
mm,
was my belief. And then as you do more literature, more research, and then you're like, oh, I tick that box, I tick that box. And then you've got these beautiful, this is ADHD, this is autism, and they kind of don't work together, but then you're doing both things. And it's really interesting. So we can definitely explore that.
mm,
So obviously now you said you specialize in generally sort of ADHD and eating disorders. So
mm,
was it your own journey and experience that kind of led you to specialize? What's kind of been the path of
mm.
going down that as that's my area of genius?
I think the lived experience definitely, because I had a very like up to nearly 30 years with binge eating. It's a long, long time. I mean, 7 years of recovery. The length of recovery can be long and confusing and messy.
Oh,
So definitely it came from my own experience, but then also just seeing that like I was at 30 to 40%, and I'm sure it's higher, of people with eating disorders have a level of neurodivergence, and I felt like there wasn't,
yeah, it's
yeah,
amazing.
like that there isn't. I worked in NHS eating disorder services, so I know how it is currently treated, and obviously I'm now well out of services, so I have quite a different slant these days. But it was just so obvious to me. It's really obvious, when I meet someone, obviously because that's the clients I'm working with. But I can just see right away there's this, like that overlap between autism and anorexia and ARFID.
Yes.
It feels like really obvious, like to me, that I can see it, and I'm just like, there's this sensitivity that this kind of, but in a really, it's a positive thing, but it's not being harnessed, because the neurotypical space is more, is this hardened kind of superstructure, kind of structure, and then we're like, well, I need to conform to that and that structure and that rigidity, and then the binge eating and the ADHD, they go hand in hand. Bulimia is aspects of that as well, and the thing is with eating disorders, we can put these neat labels to them, but there's shape shifting that comes between those diagnostic labels as well.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And the thing what's interesting is there is such a high percentage, isn't there, of individuals who do struggle with eating disorders with neurodiversity. And as we know with eating disorders, I'm sure you're very clued up on it, probably more so than I am. There's so many factors and variables, right, that come into it. It's not just, oh, you've got ADHD, you're gonna have binge eating. There's like, your
Mm,
genetics and
mm.
upbringing and your culture and your environment and all these wonderful things. So when you said you kind of specialize in sort of the ADHD side of things, just so I'm on the right page, when you say,
Yeah.
do you generally work with people who, when you say that, do you mean I do autism and ADHD, or do you genuinely try and see this trend of actually a lot of the people that I support have elements of both, if that makes sense?
Of ADHD and autism.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Generally more often than not, and also OCD. I feel like OCD and there's this rigid that the overlaps with ADHD and autism is trying to work out which is almost which. And
Mm,
then actually, well, do we actually need to define that into a binary as well? There's the sensory regulation, which is important as part
mm,
of that picture. But
yeah.
generally, yes, they are probably the me of 10 years ago.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
basically.
100%. And with this in mind, then, so when we kind of think of, I know when I was diagnosed, so I have a background of disordered eating, I had anorexia in my teens. Um, and something that was completely, it was overlooked. Neurodiversity was never mentioned to me at that point because of the incredible masking that you do see in sort of women and younger females in particular. So, for yourself, when you see people come and work with you, and obviously there aren't specific symptoms and traits that equal eating disorder, but are there certain things that you maybe see, certain characteristics of ADHD that maybe are repeated patterns that are drivers, that's probably the right way of phrasing it, of
Yeah,
the eating disorders that you work with and support? And I appreciate as well that every eating disorder is very different,
yeah,
how it
yeah.
manifests, etc.
I love how you mentioned that though, that every eating disorder is different. It is individualized, and there's a signature. I find there's an individual signature. So the patterns, in that signature are there, but it's still individual and unique to the person. So yeah, I'd say things like, the chronic masking and the burnout,
Mm,
definitely kind of being exhausted, trying to fit in. Um, definitely perfectionism and what I refer to as moral rigidity.
mm,
Like, this real fear of like getting things wrong, or like it's good or this bad, or this like there's this internal rule book that it's like it's trying to provide protection, but it's also really punishing as well. Um, yeah, other things would be like, difficulty resting,
mm,
being unable to rest, impulsivity to kind of like in terms of the intensity of emotions, like feelings really like really fast, really strong. Um, and then you've got that layer of like shame and self-criticism and guilt that comes with that as well. Um, and then I'd probably say the last thing is like this what I call body-based overwhelm. So there's like this sensory sensitivity, so that they might have other like physical health stuff going on, gut issues, exhaustion, fatigue, coming in the mix as well. So yeah, they're the patterns I would see with my ADHD clients.
yeah,
Um,
100%. And
yeah,
I'm not here to ever slam the NHS or anything like that because I appreciate there's so much going on. But you mentioned that you were in that world.
yeah,
There were things that you were like, and you said that you've changed in your practices now.
yeah.
And again, we're not here to
Mm.
slate anyone, but just out of pure curiosity, what have you adapted in your
Mm.
approach that you believe, well, obviously it will be changing lives, but is having more of an impact than
Yeah,
standard eating disorder
mm.
support that is out there to
Yeah.
masses?
So there is quite a big social justice movement around the quality of eating disorder services anyway, with people like Hope Virgo. And it's just this idea that actually it's the pressure and compliance aspect of eating disorder services. You must have a meal, like you must have a meal plan or you must weight restore. And my question, I've always had this like moral argument in my head, I suppose based on my own experience, and every time I work with someone in eating disorder services, that actually the less pressure and compliance we go for and the more compassion and softness we go for, the better results you get. You can't force anyone into a change, particularly when it comes to weight restoration, super important, absolutely. But and there's a real fear around the physical health risks in eating disorder services, but it comes from professionals in the culture and the fear of getting it wrong, and because it can be fatal. But actually, rigid kind of BMI kind of rules, rigid. Again, it comes back to this idea of rigidity, which is like the theme of everything, but like this you know, yeah, rigid BMI kind of like forcing people to put weight on so quickly, but then, okay, we discharge you now, or yes, we'll provide you with some outpatient support, but it doesn't really deal with the feelings of
Mm,
what it's like to put on weight so darn quickly.
yes.
Whether you put on weight quickly or whether you lose weight quickly, you know, it's a threat there's a felt sense of threat in the body. So yeah, like it's absolute. I understand from a physical health risks, biology, medical risk, you are looking at getting weight on a person because obviously it can be dangerous. Absolutely. But it's again as a nuanced, balanced picture of actually, okay, so we weight restore, but how can we work together to help you weight restore? And we check in at various points and go, is this going too fast? Is this going too slow? Is there somewhere we can meet in the middle? Whereas the message in eating disorder services is about being around this idea of, you know, the eating disorder voice, which, yeah, I struggle with as a concept.
Mm,
Um, and you know that people are being avoidant or resistant. No, they're not. They're being protective.
yes.
There is a felt sense of threat
I
to their
love.
bodies.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So,
That's
yeah,
such an amazing way of framing it that, you know, I remember seeing, going through it myself and people thinking, oh, you're just being difficult. And it's like, it's hard to explain unless you're in it. And that's a really
yeah,
beautiful way of phrasing it. So interesting what you've said there about leading more with that sense of self-compassion. And obviously, when people think of compassion, people think of just, oh, it's okay, don't worry, you'll be okay. But there's so many different elements to
mm,
compassion. So just out of curiosity, then, what sort of, do you have any sort of methods or tools that you use in your coaching practices? Because I think when
mm.
people say, I remember when I first heard the
It-
phrase compassionate coaching, I thought, oh, fuck that. Like, I need someone to tell me what to do. I need someone to give me a rocket up my ass. But actually, what I learned when I worked with someone who led with compassion was that you've got those two sides to it. And
mm,
actually, it gave me more autonomy and it made me feel more in control versus
yeah,
go do that, must do
yeah,
that.
yeah. Like it's I remember in my own therapy being told, you know, about nourishing my body, and the word nourish literally made me feel sick. It was so
Yes.
alien. The
Yeah.
idea of nourish, I was like, ooh, like, well, I love that word now, absolutely love it. But because your mindset is in such the beliefs are so rigid, and that's why I keep coming idea back to this sort of black and white binary thinking. It's this fixed, it's either this way or the highway.
Mhm.
But could there be somewhere in the middle? Is there maybe a more kind of like flexible, balanced way of looking at this? So the idea of building compassion, like as a muscle that's got to be practiced, it will feel alien at first. Building self-compassion, and you know, it's like it's not like just having bubble baths. We're not, it's not, you know, you know, that kind of definition of compassion. It's having to recognize and identify that you're being punishing and critical towards yourself when it's so normal.
Mm,
Like, yeah,
mm. And I think, and correct me if you've maybe seen different, that so many women who, and maybe girls that come to you, because they've been in this, maybe undiagnosed and feeling like they don't belong, that self-criticism, that self-shame is
mm,
almost just a norm as much as brushing their teeth is. It's a part, it almost feels like a part of identity. Like I remember when I
mm,
first started to explore compassion, because I'd been masking for so long and felt broken and different for so long, it was almost like just that self-criticism and that inner critic was just a part of me. It was just part of my identity. Do
yeah,
you come into contact with that, and how do you sort of help reframe that? Because something
mm,
that I do speak to a lot of people about on social media, whether it's related to food or exercise, is a lot of limiting beliefs about what they can do because they have ADHD. And I
yeah,
don't think people are being difficult or that they just don't want it bad enough. I think people
Mm.
generally internalize that
Yeah.
I'm stuck, this is who I am, and they
Yeah.
can't do anything about it. So do you have any like strategies or tools, or aside from just patience and doing the reps, that that help when it comes to this? Because I do believe this is a big battle for a lot of people.
Yeah. And I again, it's trying to be balanced as well about the idea that, is the sense of someone will come into me and be like, well, because of my ADHD, I cannot do this. And there is a sense of this is fixed and cannot be changed in any way because of that, ADHD diagnosis or autism. And or whatever label that helps, it's the pros and cons of that label of like, actually the pros is like it gives me a sense of, I understand now, I can rationalize what's going on. The cons could be, actually, yes, as you rightly say, I can internalize this as part of my identity, and a lot of this work is about identity work. If they are, who are they? This person with ADHD, does that mean that, like, I think I still very much believe in that neuroplasticity. That's not saying we're not looking to necessarily get rid of your ADHD and autism. Absolutely not. But it's like it's a strengths-based approach of like, actually, the more you understand who you are and your identity, you can then adapt. It's also about adapting your environment and being, because you're part of systems. You're not just an individual with ADHD. We also live in a world that is ADHD. Our attention is being stolen at every opportunity. So how do we? Yeah, it's. I'm afraid some of it is patience. Some of it, is leading up from my place of compassion and slowness and softness, and I'm modeling what a life could look like, with still knowing, yes, I do have ADHD and autism, but I have now built a life that harnesses those strengths, and I look at it as energy management as well. Like,
Yeah,
okay, so I have ADHD. Okay, so when do I work best? Maybe my best work is in the mornings, and I don't do some of these things in the evening because it's just not, I'm not going to have the cognitive capacity to be able to do those things. They are more simple, but this, yeah, just to give it a binary for the purpose of the podcast.
absolutely. And I always
Mm,
like to, a way I try to describe it, and this is with any sort of identity work, whether it's with neurodivergent clients or not, of anyone, when there's those limiting beliefs, it's being able
mm,
to shift from the I have or I struggle
mm.
with versus I am, and being able
Yeah.
to separate that. Because when it's that I am, it's that, well, that's
Mm,
it, that's who I am, I can't do anything about it, and it
mm,
limits people's action taking. Whereas if it's
yeah.
this is part of me, but it's not me, it's then
Mm,
moldable and flexible.
yeah.
So on that note, then obviously when you were in your clinical practices, and you said obviously at one point you were just by chance working with a lot of neurodivergent clients, but I'm guessing you have obviously a lot of experience with working with the neurotypical world,
Yeah.
the masses as they would say. Are there any key differences in terms of support that you feel is needed in terms of adapting your approach to support people with ADHD and autism versus someone came to you with a more neurotypical brain
Mm,
struggling with disordered eating? Is there anything that you find is
mm,
needed in that scenario?
mm. It's a great question. And now I'm
Many
like,
more where
how
they
do
came
we
from.
answer it? But yeah, like, I think there's unpicking the layers. I talk sort of a bit like unpicking the layers of an onion, but like the various layers of how their world and it has shaped and come to be. There are differences. I'm like, what are they? It's like there's almost like this, it's trying to define what that is. I would say probably in the neurotypical, like, I'll give you an example of when I work with someone using EMDR. With a client who is neurodivergent versus neurotypical. So the example would be a neurotypical client. I would take them through something we do is like this resourcing exercise where to help them kind of feel grounded and safe. A neurotypical person will just go boom, 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 and they've done it. When I've got someone who's neurodivergent, we will have sensory. I think it's more the sensory aspects that are different compared to neurotypical people. So that will be, I'll get them to do this grounding exercise, and someone who's neurodivergent will be like, I can't visualize.
Yeah.
You're asking me to create an image, and I'm like, I can't do that in my head. or you know, I might ask them a closed question about, can you name what that emotion is? And they were like, well, I don't know what I'm thinking or, like feeling right now. But if I ask them in a couple of days' time, they were like, yeah, I was feeling really blimmin' frustrated. For like they can't, there's aphantasia, they can't recognize the emotion in the moment. So I would say the work is slower because of these more sensory things as well. I think about I have it with myself and clients with ADHD, the sense of I'm asking you in the moment to come up with something and their brain is just blank
Yeah.
and they can't. I'm like, no, I've got nothing right now. Okay, so what we'll do instead is that you go away and have the space to think about it without the pressure of someone asking you the question on the spot and you going into freeze
And then it's coming
response.
back into that full circle of almost being
Yeah,
difficult of like, what emotion is it? I don't know. And then people
I
might
don't
see
know.
that's just, well, you've been resistant, you've been distant.
Resistant or yeah, and it's not, it's a lack of understanding about sensory differences. So I'd say this is the sensory differences between neurotypical and neurodivergent people. So
Amazing, amazing,
yeah.
amazing. So obviously the work that you do is very much around I don't like the word cure as such, but if we look at prevention versus cure, that's kind of the side of the coin that you're on,
Mm.
right? Someone's got this problem, you're there to support them in working through it. Now, when it comes to sort of ADHD and autism and the links with disordered eating, is there anything that you would like to see happen or anything that you believe would help in that element of prevention? Or do you think that it's not inevitable? I don't like to say that because I think that's quite a kind of limiting and negative thing to say. But do you almost think it is just with the nature of how people are?
It's culture,
Mm,
it's different cultures. If like if say the fitness culture is quite, coming into that world and being part of that world, is inherently, I think it's better than it was, absolutely. But maybe I've been out for about 5, 6 years out now, so you
we're
sort of
coming
get to
back
that
full
point.
circle with some
We're
pretty
coming
bad
back.
stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah,
okay, okay.
yeah, yeah.
I suppose with GLP-1s in the mix
Oh
and stuff
yeah,
as
yeah. Just
well,
stay away from it. Just stay away from it.
we're not going there. But but the culture is a very fixed binary. The culture and our internet and social media is rigid and binary. So ultimately, we need to make the internet and social media more nuanced, more like look at there are multiple truths, less binary, and our cultures at like our working culture, needs to change, whether that is the fitness world, whether that's the corporate world, coming out of the NHS world where I was taught to sacrifice myself, like I did in my childhood, essentially. I'm just saying that, but our cultures, that culture needs to change at a systemic level, which can sound very big and overwhelming, but it starts with compassion. And I think, yeah, if something I wanted to do more of is go into workplaces and we actually look at the sensory experience of being at work,
Yeah.
of like, the being on our screens all day and what that does to our nervous system, like at a micro level. But like, yeah, so that's not a simple answer. It never
Well,
is
I
with
don't
me,
think there is a
but
simple answer at all. And it's something that
yeah.
I think about a lot with, seeing people fall victim to these sort of patterns and almost, again, if we look at eating disorders
Mm.
and the complexity, it's not just the fitness diet culture and it's not just the ADHD or autism, it's they come together with maybe some other things and what
Mm.
have you. And it's something that I'm really passionate about is, not being as rigid with fitness
Yeah.
and fat loss and health.
Right.
There's so much flexibility, but something that we see obviously is that these extremes, these black and whites, these rigid
Mm.
things, it sells, it's marketing. People like the
Mm.
idea of it, and often people with ADHD have that risk-taking element, don't they?
Yeah.
'Cause they're more magnetized to the
Mm.
bodybuilding or the transformation
Yeah.
challenge or the lose a
Mm.
stone in a day sort of
Yeah.
narrative. Do you think there's something to be said about people understanding that they actually have autism and ADHD and that potentially being a preventative factor? Because if I use my own journey,
Yeah.
I had no clue. Like I didn't know I had ADHD. I didn't even consider having ADHD until I was like 24, 25, and I was unwell when I was like 15, 16. And I just thought that's who I am, that's who I am. And I
Mm.
now know a lot from doing a lot of work in my adult years. The reason that I clung on to being so lean and use that element of control was because I just felt so out of control and broken and lost in this world, and I just didn't know how to cope, and I latched on to dieting and
Yeah.
restriction.
Yeah.
And had I understood my brain, had I knew why I'd found friendships hard, knew why I, you know, got in these cycles of burnout and binge ate and all these things that
Mm,
were happening to me, I question, would I have maybe had the support? Maybe would I have had the
mm,
compassion? Maybe would I have if I knew that I was driving for dopamine, would I have needed
mm,
to go for the biscuits en masse and be in that cycle?
mm,
What are your thoughts on that? Just as a concept. And obviously the beauty is
mm,
now, because we're speaking about it more people are being
mm.
aware. But obviously I'm thinking more like younger women.
Yeah.
It's generally it's sort of like teens and adulthood where we see eating disorders really start
Mm.
to manifest, right?
So yeah, I'd be thinking family and school education in terms of, I'm going to give you an example of I was on the bus the other day and I was sat next to a toddler in a pushchair and a parent, and you could see she was quite dysregulated. The toddler had like a screen in front of them, and the toddler said to mum, "I'm hungry." And she said, "Stop being so greedy. You're going to get your dinner when you get, home, which was probably about half an hour from now." And it's like, and that for me, kind of how drip feeding of actually like that, the education coming much, younger in the fabric of our schools and our family life. Neurodivergence in terms of diagnosis, yes, absolutely can come earlier. But if the schools aren't equipped with the appropriate, EHCPs, care plans, and the resources to support children and young people, and the environment of which an eating disorder can breed in can come from families with lots of rigidity and control and academic pressure. This is multi-layered, but it starts, that conversation. I just sat there on the bus. I was literally next to them, and I had to fight the urge to go, please don't say that to, to your toddler. Say, look, either here's a snack right now, or oh, oh yeah, I can see and sense that you're hungry. And I brought a snack with me. There you go, and you can eat when you get home. So,
What would need to, and obviously this is thinking like a
mm,
dream hypothetical scenario.
mm,
Where do you think like the main support needs to come from? Because obviously the
mm,
work you do will change lives, it'll be transformative.
mm.
But even if there was 100 of you doing,
Yeah,
there's still not enough.
yeah.
Where does the main change need to happen? And if you had like a magic wand or you had access to speak to the masses, the prime
Mm,
minister, these people, where would you want to see the money or the support invested? Where could we have the most difference in preventing this
mm,
from happening or having better support?
mm. I asked that question to my clients about the magic wand, and now I'm having reversed on me. Like,
Yes and no.
um, hmm. Oh, I'm gonna almost come back to like, I'm sorry, you want one answer, but
You can give me a couple,
um,
it's fine. I won't.
I've got a couple, right? Be thinking at the point of like conception, right? You're being fed in the womb, and your relationship with food starts in the womb.
Mhm.
So if mum is well supported and well nourished, if we want to use that word, that is then gonna ripple out in terms of, yes, that in terms of, I suppose actually it comes maybe down to female empowerment and actually supporting women at the point of from, preconception through to birth, and having appropriate supports in place maternally. Um, that would definitely, from a nervous system level, support, a young one, and know that they are being nurtured and supported, and there isn't a lack or a scarcity. And then I would say I'd overthrow the education system and go from we can see the problems that are in the education system now with the rigidity and the compliance of education.
Mm.
Is there more flexible ways that we can deliver education, for those, so many of my neurodivergent clients who come to me who aren't in school, if they're younger, they've been homeschooled because it's just the sensory environment is just too much. Could we, the sensory adaptations we could make to schools, changing the environment about how the education's delivered. That's what I did in university wellbeing. You know, a student will come in and it's like, okay, we don't want this person to fail their course. How can we get them to pass their course? Okay, what adaptations and adjustments can we make? Oh, okay, we can have a note taker in with them, or, you know, we can have additional mentoring support, or, you know, we can turn down the lights. You know, it can be really simple adjustments. But yeah, it would have to be probably as the bigger change, it's changed the education system so it's
Amazing.
less rigid.
100%. And do you think if the child grew up in an environment which was less rigid and felt more flexible, there will be a positive
Mm.
impact on their
Yeah,
relationship with self and food as a
yeah,
domino effect?
yeah,
I love that.
basically that.
Yeah.
Mm,
And it comes back to that very cliche quote, isn't it, about eating disorders aren't, it's not about the food.
mm,
And I think people who aren't inside it, it's a very hard thing to get your head around. What do you mean it's not about the food? What do you mean it's not about
mm,
the food? But
mm.
it's really not. Like food is almost like it's a manifestation, isn't it, of you
Yeah, I look at
in the world.
the tip of the iceberg, isn't it? But what's under the iceberg?
Yeah. And when you were sort of saying about the whole NHS and like it's about weight restoration, ticking that box again, you kind of then saying, well, we'll sort the bit that we can see. But if
Yeah.
you're then saying it's down to this and it's down to this, all these things suppressed that aren't covered,
Mm,
is the person actually supported? Well, what's next? And from
mm,
again, I don't know if you know anything directly or just from your
mm,
experience, just to quickly touch on this. So if we're saying that we just cover the tip of the iceberg here, do you often
mm.
see that these people, or have you heard that these people then fall into um like addiction or relapse? Is that something that you see happen because they haven't actually got to why they were struggling or what was going on for their inner
Yeah.
world?
Yeah, addiction. I mean, I've got an addiction background anyway. I had a 10-year painkiller addiction on top of the ADHD and the disordered eating, and I actually forget that part of my story sometimes because it's not a problem for me now. But yeah, just it shape shifts into something else. It morphs into another presentation if you don't get to the root. And I say roots, plural. It
Yeah.
is not one root. It's just that, you know, when someone comes to me going, right, we are going to find the fix and a cure for my eating disorder, I'm like, no, we're not. We're going to find the multiple layered experience that is your world
100%. Yeah.
and find the roots.
100%.
So,
100%. And I'm so
um,
glad you said that because that was my story. It was get her weight restored, get her eating enough calories. And then it was, well, then I was in binge eating. Then I
yeah,
was hyperfixated on bodybuilding. Then I was burning
yeah,
out at work and
yeah,
nothing until I understood the ADHD, why I use food for control, all of those multifaceted
mm,
layers and roots. It was like, now I can work through this.
mm.
And I guess I wish I'd had a Becky in my life 10 years ago. But then I guess you could say I wouldn't be where I am now, but
Yeah, yeah.
I do for that element of my story. So
Mm,
speaking of having a Becky in your life, for anyone who has listened to this before I come on to our final just little fun question,
mm.
where can people find you? Where do you hang out on social media, etc. if people do want to follow your content, reach out for support, etc.
Yeah, so Instagram is Becky Grace Therapy. LinkedIn, a bit more corporate, but yeah, got a LinkedIn. It's Becky Grace Irving, because Irving's actually my surname. But I just use my middle name. And oh yeah, there's occasional Facebook posts sometimes. You'll if you put in Becky Grace Therapy, you'll find me
Amazing.
somewhere.
Amazing. I'll
Yeah,
link those in the description as well. So if anyone want to, follow our content, or obviously if they are struggling and
yeah.
looking for someone who is really amazing for some
Mm,
support, or to refer someone,
mm,
Becky's Becky's the gal. But
mm.
just to finish, I always like to use a really fun question, which I don't prep you for because I don't want you to overthink it, which is obviously a very typical ADHD thing. So I'm actually going to ask in the context of ADHD, the blend that is that beautiful blend of ADHD and autism, where there's so many contradictions going on at one time. If ADHD was an animal, what animal would it be? This is why I didn't want to prep you for it, because I know you just sat down and analysed it, and as we do.
Um, I can only think of a sausage dog because I've got two of them, and but it's like there's yeah, yeah, we'll go with it being the sausage dog actually because there is a real high level of control, and with sausage dogs they know what they like. They're very stubborn. I'm not saying people with ADHD is stubborn, but there's a real loving, sensitive layer to
Yeah.
them as well.
Yeah. And I think and then we went really deep here. It feels like English literature exam, doesn't it? Like overanalyzing it. They're not what they seem on the surface
No,
at all.
bark,
Like
bark, bark. But
I
actually,
remember seeing them in the film, like they're the cutest little things. And then
mm,
sometimes they seem really aggressive. They're so compassionate. So yeah, I love
yeah.
that. I love
Yeah.
it. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. I will make sure everything is linked in the description for people to find you. And for everyone else, I will see you on next week's episode.